This is the Uptick Network Stock Day Podcast, sponsored by InvestorsHangout.com. Penny stock news and interviews from the microcap world. Public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world. With your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, we have a returning guest. He is Joel Leetzow. He is the CEO of Cortex Business Solutions Inc. They trade on the TSX Venture Exchange under the ticker symbol CBX. Joel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's been a little while. I see that you cleaned house and everything. I think January 16th, your whole thing was to lower the overhead and bring up the revenues, and I think you've done that. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of hard work for our team, but the reality of it is we had about $7 million a year worth of burn to get rid of, and we've successfully done that. So I couldn't be happier or prouder of the accomplishment.
You know, give my listeners a little bit about statement of what your company is all about, and then we're going to get into some Q&A today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Cortex is an electronic invoicing network. Basically, that's probably a fancier way of simply saying we've eliminated the paper of a traditional invoice process where a vendor would send a paper invoice in the mail to a customer. The customer would get that out of the mail, open it, hopefully approve it and pay it. And we basically reduced what used to be about a 20-day turnaround on a paper-based transaction to milliseconds and a data integration point. So people think in terms of emails and other ways of moving data. We move it basically through a secure XML feed. And we process about 14 million documents a year, worth about $18 billion on our network.
You know, Cortex is a different kind of company today than it was about 2 years ago when you joined. What have you and your team done to revitalize the whole company and the whole concept?
Well, I really believe, there's a blessing for every CEO who inherits a current operation, and in my case, there were several. The fact of it is although I think this story wasn't told properly in the messaging and some of the other things about the go-to-market strategy needed some improvement, the bottom line is the original Cortex idea of eliminating paper and eliminating manual processes and labor has always been a good one. The unfortunate part is I think with a lot of startups, they get into, subsidizing their business for their customers to get a foothold. And unfortunately, in Cortex's case, they just never got out of that mode. We'd burned about $64 million of other people's money to get to the point where I walked in the door. And I've done everything I can to reverse that. We've redone our website, we've redone our pricing, we've redone our messaging. We've went out to customers and asked them to support us through the drafting of case studies. So what I'd like to say is that we've simply addressed what was missing in this business all along, which is a proper methodology of how to deploy these systems in a quick way that customers get exceptional value and talk about it to other people. And as we all know, a network is a network, but word of mouth in a business environment is always your best advertising. And I think that's what's really been the big hold this year for us is people have been willing to talk about us, and we've asked them, unabashedly to do so.
You know, your last quarter's report came out, I think, yesterday or the day before. Your expenses were down by 9%. The cost of doing a sale was down 45%. But what really made me, look at your numbers there, your project management fees were up over 6,000%. Wow.
I know it. Well, I'll tell you what, I wish I could tell you that our whole business was based on services, but I think what it really does is, for the first time really as a business, we've charged for the professional services, and in doing so, we've delivered qualified people to perform that work. Anytime a company takes on a major software implementation, there's change management that happens. And I think what a lot of folks forget is, the customer simply hasn't done it before, or they're not well versed at doing it often. And so what we've taken is an approach of basically holding our customer's hand with professionals who've been there, done that. The folks in our delivery team or our implementation team have, quite frankly, installed 10,000 customer systems. They're good at it. And we go in and coach that customer through the process. So what you're seeing there, though, in that, I'll call it an extreme peak in revenue for that specific part of our business, is we're transitioning one of our last customers off of what we call legacy, which is simply our old non-web-based code base. We have 3 of 10,000 customers remaining on that platform, and our goal is to get all of the customers onto the new platform. So this was our last major. It's a significant investment of money for them, a significant investment of time for us. It's about an 18-month project, and part of that includes some really nice funding for some extension work within our platform that, frankly, all 10,000 of our customers will become the beneficiary of.
My guest today is Joel Leetzow. He is the CEO of Cortex Business Solutions Inc. They trade on the TSX under the ticker symbol CBX. You know, what sets Cortex apart from the other providers in the oil and gas market, and how do you better position yourself to deliver long-term value?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, it starts with our technology. It's just simply different. Cortex is a many-to-many network. Back in the old days of EDI, we talked in terms of binary connections, or 2 parties connecting simply to transport data between the two. What we've got is a network that allows 10,000 different companies to connect to 10,000 different companies. Any of them can send invoices to each other, assuming that there's a client and vendor relationship already in place. The other thing that our technology does uniquely is we federate onto other networks. So where most networks are closed to the community within, ours is actually a public network. There are fees associated with membership, if you can put it in that way. But the reality of it is we are delivering mail for our customers beyond the Cortex network, federating with our competitors and folks in other parts of the globe. And what that really does is allows our customers to simply get more value out of Cortex than any other brand or product like us on the market.
You know, I noticed looking over your last Q, you guys are starting to put a lot of money into marketing and sales. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure I can. And let me just preface that by saying that comes following a complete elimination of a sales team. When I got here and we were facing survival and what are we going to do with the little bit of capital we had, and how are we going to change the game so that we can survive to grow, I basically eliminated almost the entire sales force of 14 people, figuring that better for us to go out and take care of the customers we had versus searching for new ones. And ultimately what we've done in the past 6 to 12 months is completely rebuild our sales force. We've hired veterans from within the industry, and what you're starting to see now is basically, for the first time in a long time for Cortex, growth, where we're literally going out there and organically selling net new customers and getting them stood up quickly. And you're going to see that compounding effect being a SaaS-based company. What we delivered this quarter will remain, and then we'll stack on top of that next quarter. And I think ultimately people understand the network effect here is that we have multiple parties transacting at one given time. And as the oil and gas business at least stabilizes, I'm not going to say it's come back, what we're seeing is our customers need to save money more than ever. We've got a pretty interested audience out there looking for our wares.
Your revenues were $2.7 million this second quarter, up 6% over 2016. A bigger projection? Can you give us any kind of forward statement for the third and fourth quarter here?
I can't specifically for the third and fourth quarter, but I'll give you one even bigger.
Okay.
I came out in July of this year, which is our fiscal anniversary, with a plan, and that plan was to double the company's revenues by 2020. That's pretty aggressive. It puts us in a mode of basically growing 30% per year for 3 years straight. And the way that's going to work is basically in a curve where we ramp up, we accelerate through year 2, and we come across the finish line in year 3 screaming. What I'm excited about is that we're actually ahead of our goals for year 1. And year 1 would, of course, in most people's playbooks, be the toughest to get the momentum going, get the people in place doing the right things. So I think you can look forward to a Cortex in 2020 of being a $20 million revenue company, focused on recurring revenue, and you're going to see our EBITDA, which the analysts have called positive this quarter. I follow GAAP principles, and we're still not quite there in my math, but the reality of it is this business at a 65-70% margin, which is where we're at, should really be able to produce some nice profits for our shareholders in the future.
You know, we went through all the metrics and everything, but what does the future hold for Cortex? Do we got any M&A on horizons? Are everything going to be organic growth going forward?
Well, I think it'll ultimately be a combination. I'd like to think that we're going to master the organic before we decide to bolt on something else. In my past life, I did 47 public company acquisitions in 6 years, and I can tell you that it gets dizzying after a while to keep the customers happy, keep the employees happy, et cetera. So
right.
there is no doubt that in Cortex's growth strategy will be some bolt-ons in the future. But I'd like to say two things. One is I know our shareholders would appreciate it if we raised money at a higher price, and so organically growing the value of the company in the short term is the mission. And we're at 65 headcount today, down from 130. I'm certainly in no race to get it back to where we were without the revenue to come along with it. So I think we will be looking for strategic acquisitions. I'd certainly like to find a Cortex type company in a different vertical where we can simply bolt them onto Cortex, maybe even leverage our incumbent technology, which I think is about as good as it gets, and have some additional growth beyond the organic doubling.
Joel Leetzow is our guest today. He is the CEO of Cortex Business Solutions. They trade on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol CBX. In closing here, Joe, is there anything you want to get out to my listeners that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch upon?
I think just simply that, we are a GAAP-based company for the public markets. I think our disclosure borders on almost too much at times, but I tend to be an open book. People should be able to look at this investment without a whole lot of guidance and understand exactly where we're at and exactly where we're going. And as we've seen in the past year, even for being a small microcap, people are paying attention. And we've had a pretty good run as of late, and I plan on continuing that.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Please don't wait as long as you did this time to come back on. It's always interesting to hear how you're building something up over there. And I want you to come back in the next 50 to 60 days and give us a report.
You bet I will. I really appreciate the time.
The following program is entirely sponsored and produced by Uptick Newswire LLC, which is responsible for the following content. The opinions and information provided on today's show are those of the guests and of those of the respective companies they represent, and does not necessarily reflect those of the staff or management of this station. Uptick Network encourages all listeners of the show to do their own due diligence and research when determining investment strategies that'll work for them, or to seek the assistance of an investment professional. The guests of today's show may have paid to appear on the show and are not directly affiliated with Uptick Network